What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, where today we are on our 32nd in-depth character review, where we continue to review another Sith, and that Sith is the one and only Count Dooku. Just like many of the other Sith in the game, Count Dooku got a tune-up and he became useful again. There was a pack that came out for him, and people are just wondering, should I look into this character? Should I gear him up? Should I farm him up? Well, my friends, today you and I are going to talk about just that. As I pull up the Hall of Fame, I have all the characters ranked, and in case you want to know why these characters landed here, click on the card in the top right-hand corner where you will see the video where I ranked all the characters and explained the rationale behind each ranking, but we placed Count Dooku as a master, and I will explain why he ended up there. And in the comments down below, let me know who you want me to review next. I can keep reviewing Sith, I have Savage Opress Zeta, or I can move on to other characters. I have Rogue One gameplay I have never been able to tap into, so you guys let me know what you want to see next. And before I start reviewing Dooku, every gameplay you will see, if he has Zeta gameplay, I will let you know if it's Zeta, because I want you to know the difference between a Zeta Count Dooku and a non-Zeta Count Dooku. With all that preliminary information set out, let's talk about Count Dooku's significance in the Star Wars universe. Born on the planet of Sereno, Count Dooku was a Sith Lord who was the head of state for the Confederacy of Independent Systems during the Clone Wars. Dooku was actually once a Jedi Master, believe it or not, who was a Padawan of Grand Master Yoda, and after a series of events, he eventually left the Jedi Order to become an apprentice for Darth Sidious, with the hope of seeing the Republic and the Jedi Order fall. During his time at the Jedi Order, he was known for being one of the finest swordsmen, and it was thought that only Mace Windu could match him as an equal, and only Yoda was known to be a superior to Count Dooku. He was also a master tactician in the art of war and always managed to be one step ahead of his enemies, and was very elusive for the Republic to get a hold of. His story, though, came to an end in Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin Skywalker overpowered Dooku, and at the command of Palpatine, Anakin beheaded Dooku, which began to open the way for Anakin Skywalker to be drawn to the dark side. And in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, we continue to see Dooku throw his enemies off guard with his superior swordsmanship and his ability to lead his allies into battle by being one step ahead and avoiding whatever his enemies may plan. Getting on to Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, we first talk about how do we unlock this character, and Count Dooku has quite a history and a lot of places where you can farm him. First of all, I want to give you guys a brief history lesson. He was in the best pack ever for this game, no arguing there. For only $4.99, you were guaranteed to unlock him at 3 stars. I wish that we can get more of these packs, but it seems like we're not heading that direction. But I just want to throw it out there, this was the best pack ever, and if you bought it, you just took place in one of the greatest moments in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes history. But in more modern times, we have a lot of other ways you can acquire him. First of all, in the Chromium packs, you can use your hard-earned crystals and pull those packs to get Count Dooku, although there are plenty of other ways to get him that I would recommend. First of all, there's the Sith Order bundle. For $19.99, you can get 80 shards of Count Dooku and a random assortment of other type of gear that you would need. Outside of these packs that cost money or crystals, I would highly suggest you instead farm him through the free-to-play method, which you can find him on Hard Battles, Dark Side 1C, and Light Side 1C, and most especially, definitely farm him in the Cantina Battle 6G for 12 energy. Time to 7 stars, assuming you can get 7 shards a day, which is a reasonable assumption, I think. 2 from Hard Battles and 5 from Cantina. It should take you roughly 47 days to get him from 0 shards all the way to 7 stars. But you need to know why you should farm this character, and to do so, we're going to talk about the stats of Count Dooku before mods and abilities are even considered, and we first start rolling up to the pros, where he is a super fast character in the game. We see him at number 2 for speed. The average speed in this game nowadays is 127, and Count Dooku is way above this at 167 speed. To put this in perspective, he is just 3 points below TIE Fighter Pilot, who is at 170 speed, and we will elaborate on this a little bit more later. Following this, potency. This guy is numero uno, owns this category at number 1 for potency, with the average being 31%. Count Dooku is at 75%, and this is more than enough to be effective in Arena. And the last thing we have here, number 28 in armor penetration, with the average being 52. Count Dooku is at 65, so that means his attacks won't be mitigated as much and will be able to pierce through the thick armor like Fives, Sun Fac, and General Kenobi. Just like a couple of the other Sith, we actually do not have anything in the average section, so that means we gotta get onto the stuff that Chewbacca wants to cry about. And unfortunately, there is a lot of stuff in here that we have to talk about, with the first being maximum basic damage. He is number 85, really low down there, where the average is 5,522. Count Dooku is at 4,146. The close relative of that is basic damage, where he is number 90. Average is 4,349. And Count Dooku is pretty low on here at 3,461. And to keep this in mind, he just got a bump up from what it was previously, and it's still a bit lower than the average. Then in terms of defense, we have number 67 in health. Not as bad as the other things, but it starts creeping into that bad territory, where the average is 19,228. Count Dooku is at 16,473, which puts him below the average and the median. Similar to that, we have protection, where he is number 85, average being 19,772. Count Dooku is at 14,021, which is below the average and median yet again. And one more thing to point out, he has 0% health steal, but as we will find out, between using his Zeta and maybe a certain leader, you can easily overcompensate for the fact that he does not have a base health steal. Now we turn the page and look at his abilities and see how that goes hand in hand with the numbers that we just looked at. And we first get to his most frequent attack he will be using, and that is Hindering Press. This deals physical damage to a target enemy with a 50% chance to attack again. These attacks have a 25% chance to stun for 1 turn and a 25% chance to inflict ability block for 1 turn. And the debuff chances are doubled if you're going up against Jedi, and the best thing about this is that this cannot be countered, and this does roughly 3,133 to 3,461. Now, before all the tune-ups for the Sith, he could only apply these debuffs to Jedi, and now he can apply these debuffs to anyone, which is very important. And it's also great when going up against teams that have Aayla Secura or Fives or I'm a Gun Die leads, because you don't want them retaliating against Dooku since he has a low protection and health pool. Following this, we have Force Lightning, one of the first abilities I thought was absolutely amazing when I first started playing this game. And what it does is that he deals special damage to a target enemy with a 50% chance to shock and stun them for 1 turn, and a 50% chance to stun a random enemy. Debuff chances are doubled against Jedi, and this does 3,752 to 4,146 damage, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. So assuming the enemy will not resist, this is a guaranteed stun and shock against Jedi, and could quickly shut down Yoda, Kenobi, or Barriss, seeing how fast he is. I mentioned this in many videos, how Dooku should have been able to apply shock all this time like Palpatine, and it's great to see they finally incorporated that feedback from all of us, because shock is one of the most deadly debuffs in the game. This next ability is the least impressive of Count Dooku, and it's called Master Tactician. All allies gain 15% evasion and gain offense up for 2 turns whenever they evade. Now, if you were playing the game almost a year ago, this was the meta. Him and Old Ben, they were the 2 best leaders in the game at one point. However, today it is very basic and severely outdated. This leader ability was probably one of the most stressful and most annoying teams to ever go up against due to the constant evasion. However, today we do not see this anymore since Maul is the king of evasion currently. What I would really like to see, I know a lot of us have been asking for this, is to see the developers finally tap into the unused Separatist tag that was added a while ago to maybe make characters like General Grievous really good. Lastly, we have Flawless Repost, and this is his Zeta ability, but before before I talk about the Zeta, let me tell you what it is before the upgrade. He has a 100% chance to counterattack, and in addition, whenever he attacks outside of his turn, he deals 15% counter damage and has a 25% to gain 45% turn meter. The Zeta upgrade does this. He will instead deal 30% more counter damage and will be able to regain 10% protection and will gain critical hit immunity for 1 turn. This unique ability is what makes Dooku the Count Dooku. This unique combined with his high speed means he will be really active in battle. Since he will counter a lot, that means his basic has more opportunities to apply stun or to apply ability block, which can really change the pace of the game. The critical hit immunity is meant to prolong his survivability in the game because he has very low protection, very low health, but constantly counterattacking means he will get this and he will try to mitigate the damage from big damage dealing teams like Rebels, Droids, and Maul Zeta lead teams. Although the Zeta is pretty interesting, I would recommend instead just use him under a Nihilus lead. On every hit, he would gain 150% health. Main reasons to invest in Dooku Zeta is if you love him, you don't have a Nihilus leadership, or you just want more counter damage, or you really just want that critical hit immunity, which is pretty much the biggest thing in my opinion. And the last note to make, on a Nihilus lead, when he's leading Dooku, the protection regeneration will not do anything. It is completely eliminated, and the Zeta loses an important purpose when using it under that Nihilus lead. One of the best things about Count Dooku is his gear requirements, and he is very easy to gear. Let me tell you why. When it comes to raid gear, he is below the average of 3, where he is only needing 2 pieces of raid gear. And those 2 pieces are the Mark V Fusion Furnace needed at Gear 8 and a Mark 7 Nubian Scanner needed at Gear 9, and no more raid gear needed from Gear 10 to Gear 11, which is kind of nice. Next thing we have is gold gear. This is where he's kind of iffy. He's above the average, where he needs 440 pieces of gold gear, and those being 3 Mark 8 biotech implants and 1 Mark 9 Fabritech data pad. Good news is he only needs 1 gold piece to get from Gear 10 to Gear 11, which is a biotech implant. Purple gear is the great story. He is way below the average. Average is 1,119 purple pieces, and Count Dooku needs 830 pieces. And to put that in perspective, he is number 96 in the game. Only 10 other characters who have lower requirements than him, and the most popular pieces he will need are the Mark 6 hypo syringes, 300 pieces of those, 50 of those are going to the fusion furnace that I mentioned earlier, and he will need 100 Mark 3 stun cuffs. Then when looking at blue, green, and white gear, Count Dooku is way below average. He is actually dead last for blue gear. That's how easy he is, and he's either average or above average for green and white gear. Let's start talking about this objective part of the review, where I give you my random tips, setup recommendations, Yoda's do or do not checklist, many other things, best friends, mortal enemies, but we first start off with my thoughts. So, as we know, he did not get a complete rework like Kylo Ren or Boba Fett, but rather a tune-up, which was just what he needed. Once the evasion meta ended, he just started vanishing out of nowhere. He was weak as a 100-year-old wet noodle, and the fact that he could not control non-Jedi held him back a lot, since we started changing away from a Jedi meta, and he was only good in certain situations when going up against Sith. But now, with the improvements of Sith across the board and the addition of Darth Nihilus, he is back in the game. Still not an amazing hitter by any means, but he can support his team by applying deadly debuffs to any character on the field. With the right modding, he may be able to outrun your enemies like TIE Fighter Pilot. His versatility and his support kit makes him usable in many lineups, but if you really want to see him shine, you have to use him under a Darth Nihilus leadership or just with other fellow Sith. And if you are going to use Count Dooku, you need to watch out for his mortal enemies, because there are a few out there which can completely shut down Count Dooku's usefulness. His biggest enemies are those who can prevent him from counterattacking, since that is what he thrives off of in this game, and that is mainly from characters like Darth Maul, Rey, K2SO, Django, who can apply daze, and other characters who can stun him, such as Royal Guard, Count Dooku himself, and others like Old Daka. Other counters to Count Dooku are those who can prevent counterattacking, like Count Dooku himself or General Grievous. On their basics, they will not trigger any sort of counterattacks. Other major issues are those who can cleanse and those who can spread tenacity up, and the list can be something like Yoda, Chiro Imwe, Akbar, Kenobi, Rex are just really big counters because without applying debuffs, he loses a lot of importance. Buff immunity, if you're using Count Dooku Zeta, buff immunity means he will not be giving himself critical hit immunity. And the two other things are characters that can apply healing immunity because with the Zeta, he won't regain protection, and under a Nihilus lead, he won't be gaining all that lovely health. So characters like that can be Death Trooper, Kylo Ren, IG-88, General Grievous, and lastly, the big thing, tanks are also a huge issue because they just absorb all of his attacks and they are just mere scratches to those tanks, to be honest. Looking at the best friends, pretty much all of the Sith, I've mentioned this in all my previous videos, so go check those out, but the main thing that really sticks out is Darth Nihilus. He is my favorite leader for Count Dooku just because all the reasons I mentioned in the past, all that health regeneration helps out a lot. In many of these arena gameplay battles you're seeing, he gains 100% protection by the end of the battle. It looks like he never got touched because he is constantly healing himself through all those counterattacks. But he also works in many other things, such as a counterattack team, Ayla, Fives, Kylo Ren, or even I'm a Gun Die leads, or if you really want to annoy your enemies, set up a stun lock team. And what I mean by that is characters that can go and constantly stun. Royal Guard, Dooku, Old Daka was one of the metas in the past, and it was super frustrating to constantly get stunned. Although in the Clone Wars, General Kenobi and Count Dooku were adversaries, in this game, they really are best friends. If you don't have the Zeta, like I personally do not have Count Dooku Zeta, having General Kenobi really compensates by getting that critical hit immunity over to Count Dooku. Won't be on Count Dooku's terms, but it does show up and it does really help Count Dooku survive a lot longer in battle. Now the mods are pretty much the same story as most of the other Sith with a couple exceptions. If you are not using a Nihilus lead, then what you want to do is pretty much amp out as much damage output as possible, and you can do that by playing around with critical chance, critical damage, or offense mod sets to just increase that damage output, speed mods to just make him even faster, and health mod sets could also work. But when looking at primary and secondary mods, the general rule of thumb is for most characters is pump their speed up as much as possible, and Count Dooku, you really want to do that to try to outrun those TIE fighter pilots out there and some of those Maul leads as well. But also increase his protection, because if you are going to give his Zeta, you want to make sure that protection pool is as large as possible so he regains a lot of protection on those counter attacks. Under a Nihilus lead, this is a big thing. You want to stay away from critical chance, critical damage mods since they will do you absolutely no good. Personally, I think he is the perfect candidate for offense mods to make his damage output even higher, meaning he does even more damage and has even higher health regeneration, and speed is also a great alternative as well under a Nihilus lead. Although hard to see, tenacity mods might actually prevent him from being dazed or stunned more often, but I prefer all the former mod sets that I mentioned, and primary, secondary mods. As always, up that protection, up that health, up that speed to make sure he is just surviving and being active in battle as long as possible. Finally, we get to Yoda's do or do not checklist, and Arena is definitely do. You want to go and use him, especially under a Nihilus lead. I've said this so many times. Galactic War, definitely do. Dark Side battles, Cantina battles, yes, 100% do. That stun really does come in handy. Mod challenges, as of now, no Sith mod challenges, so we will have to say do not for that. Ships, just like that, do not. Rancor raid and the AAT raid. He's not the best character to use. You could use him in certain instances, but he will not be a first string character, so I will say do not for both of those categories. Don't be farming him with the intention of being amazing in the raid, because his goal is not to be raid specific. It's more for Galactic War and Arena type of battles. But that is pretty much it, guys. Let's pull up that Hall of Fame one more time so you can see where Count Dooku lies in the big picture, and we placed him as a master. Really good flexible character. He succeeds mainly under certain teams, which prevents him from getting into that Grandmaster status, but a great character nonetheless, and I highly recommend, especially for beginner players, to get this character. Really easy to gear, very good kit even before the Zeta, and a lot of ways to make him useful. So thank you once again so much for watching. watching this episode. I hope you learned something, hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, there's a link down below in the description to purchase an Anno T101 t-shirt. Really helps out the channel, so I thank you guys so much. And as always, liking the video, subscribing, sharing it, all that amazing stuff helps me out just as well. Be sure to let me know down below in the comments who our next in-depth character review should be on, and we will talk again very soon. Peace out.